Chapter 1. The Woman in the Shadows. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It came down in steady curtains, sweeping across the wild Yorkshire moors and soaking the earth until the paths became treacherous and the heather bent beneath its weight. Inside the old stone manor that crouched on the hillside, Eleanor Hargrave sat by the narrow window, her needle poised but idle in her hand. The fire burned low in the hearth, crackling now and then, but the room remained dim. The lady she served, old Mistress Whitcomb, had dozed off in her chair with her knitting fallen to her lap. The steady ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece filled the silence. Eleanor's reflection stared back at her in the rain-streaked glass. Pale face, eyes too serious for her 23 years, a veil of dark hair tucked simply beneath her bonnet. She often thought she had grown into a ghost of her former self, a shadow slipping quietly through rooms where others laughed and sparkled. But that was the way of things now. Shadows offered safety. The village below did not forget scandals easily. When she went into town for errands, whispers followed her. Poor girl, such a pity, such disgrace, though she hides it well. Eleanor had learned to hold her head high, to walk as though she heard nothing, but the sting always returned when she was alone. Tonight, however, there was talk of an unusual visitor to the region. Mistress Whitcomb's maid had whispered of it earlier when setting the supper tray, that Lord Nathaniel Ashford, master of the great estate across the valley, had returned from abroad. Eleanor had heard of him, of course. Who had not? The young lord who had gone off to war with a regiment of cavalry, who had lost his elder brother in Spain and come home a changed man. Ashford Manor had been shuttered for years in his absence, its fields poorly kept, its tenants uncertain of the future, and now suddenly the lord had returned. Eleanor told herself it mattered little. She lived her life quietly, a companion in an old widow's household, no part of the grand affairs of the gentry. Still, as she sat by the window, she found her thoughts wandering to the figure of the man she had never seen. What scars he might carry, what burdens pressed on his shoulders. A sharp rap at the door startled her. Mistress Whitcomb stirred, blinking. "See who it is, child," the old woman muttered. Eleanor set aside her work and crossed the dim hall. When she opened the heavy oak door, the rain gusted in, and she found herself looking up into the face of a tall, broad-shouldered man. His coat was dark with rain, his hair unkempt from the wind, but his eyes, a clear grey, keen and searching, held her still. "Forgive me," he said, voice low and steady. "I seek shelter. The storm grew worse than I expected on the road from Ashford." Eleanor's breath caught. She knew, before he even gave his name, that this was Lord Ashford himself. There was an unmistakable presence about him, the kind of authority that no rainstorm could diminish. She dipped into a curtsy, though her voice was calm when she replied, "You are welcome, my lord. Please come in out of the wet." He stepped inside, water dripping from his coat onto the flagstones. Up close, she saw the fine lines at his temples, the weariness around his mouth. Not age, for he could be no more than 30, but something harder, something carved by years of battle and loss. Mistress Whitcomb, now roused, greeted him with delighted surprise, for she had known his family long ago. Soon the lord was seated by the fire with a glass of brandy, the old woman fussing over him. Eleanor poured the drink with steady hands, though she felt his gaze upon her more than once. thoughts. He spoke little at first, answering Mistress Whitcomb's questions with politeness but no flourish. Yet when Eleanor set the decanter down, his eyes lifted to hers. "And you, miss?" he said quietly. "You live here?" Eleanor inclined her head. "Yes, my lord. I am companion to Mistress Whitcomb." Something flickered in his expression. Curiosity, perhaps, or recognition of the quiet strength in her bearing. But he asked nothing more, and she was glad. She did not wish to speak of herself, not tonight, not ever if she could help it. As the storm raged outside, the three of them spoke by the firelight. Nathaniel Ashford's voice was deep, measured, carrying the faintest trace of command even when he spoke gently. Eleanor found herself listening more closely than she meant to, noticing the way he paused before answering, as though weighing each word. When at last the hour grew late and he rose to take his leave, Eleanor fetched his cloak. Their hands brushed as she held it out to him, and she started at the sudden warmth of his touch. He gave her a slight bow, his eyes lingering a moment too long. "My thanks, Miss Hargrave," she answered softly. "Eleanor Hargrave." He inclined his head once more. "Miss Hargrave." Then he was gone into the rain, leaving the hall strangely empty behind him. Eleanor closed the door, her heart unsteady in her chest. She told herself it was nothing, merely a traveler seeking shelter. Yet as she climbed the stairs to her small chamber, she knew she would not soon forget the way his grey eyes had met hers, cutting through the shadows she had wrapped around herself for so long. And though she did not yet know it, this night was the beginning, the moment when her life, long confined to silence and whispers, began to shift towards something she could neither expect nor resist. Chapter 2. The Lord of Ashford Manor. The following morning dawned grey, the storm having left the valley soaked and shrouded in mist. Lord Nathaniel Ashford stood at the tall windows of his ancestral manor, looking out across the lands that had once been the pride of his family. Ashford Manor had been in his bloodline for centuries, a fortress of stone, softened into a stately home over generations. Yet now its gardens were overgrown, its fields neglected, its tenants anxious. He had not been here in 7 years. War had claimed all his strength, and grief had claimed the rest. His brother's death had left the estate to him, along with duties he had once been too young to bear. But he was not young any longer. The years in uniform, the battles fought across Europe, had carved the boy from him, and left only this man, weary, scarred, but resolute. He turned from the window as his steward, Mr. Fletcher, entered the drawing room. "The tenants are eager for news, my lord," Fletcher said. "They wish to know what your plans will be now you are home." Nathaniel poured himself a measure of black coffee and drank it quickly. "Tell them I will see to the estate's restoration. The land will be tended, the roofs repaired, and their contracts honored. But it will take time. I return to a house nearly in ruins." Fletcher nodded but hesitated. "And the matter of society, my lord? The county expects you will soon host a gathering. They are curious about their returning master." Nathaniel's mouth tightened. "Let them be curious. I have no desire for society's idle chatter." He said it firmly, yet even as the words left him, he recalled the quiet woman who had opened the door to him the night before, Miss Eleanor Hargrave. Her name had lingered with him through the night. She had not been like the painted ladies of London or the coquettish debutantes he remembered from his youth. She had been still, composed, almost austere, and yet something in her eyes had unsettled him, a sorrow she carried close, as if she lived arrived half hidden in a world of silence. Nathaniel, who had seen men cling to shadows on battlefields, knew that look well. He set his cup down with a decisive sound. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "a gathering is not such a poor idea after all. Let it be arranged in a fortnight. Ashford must be seen as alive again." Fletcher's eyebrows rose. "Very good, my lord." That afternoon, Nathaniel rode into the village. The cobbled streets were muddy from the storm, but life bustled again, carts rolling, children darting between stalls. Heads turned as he passed, for the people had not seen their lord in years. He dismounted outside the apothecary, intending to speak with the physician about Mistress Whitcomb, whom he had learned was ailing, but as he stepped out, his gaze caught on a figure across the square. Miss Hargrave. She was carrying a basket of bread and cheese, her bonnet drawn low. Even so, Nathaniel recognized her instantly. Something in the way she moved, measured, graceful, as though she wished not to be seen and yet could not help but draw notice. Their eyes met, and she startled faintly before dipping her head in polite acknowledgement. "Miss Hargrave," he said, crossing to her. "My lord." Her voice was soft, but there was no tremor in it. She met his gaze, though her hands tightened on the basket. "I trust Mistress Whitcomb fares well after last night's storm?" he asked. "She is well enough," Eleanor answered. "You were most welcome company. She has spoken of nothing else since." Nathaniel allowed a faint smile to touch his mouth. "Then I am glad of it. And you, Miss Hargrave, you live quietly here?" A guarded expression flickered across her features. "Quietly, yes. It suits me." "Does it?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. "Forgive my boldness, but I cannot imagine seclusion suits a spirit such as yours." Eleanor's lips parted in surprise. Few men spoke so directly. She looked away, feigning interest in the bustle of the square. "You imagine much, my lord. I am content with my place." Yet Nathaniel thought he heard the faintest note of longing beneath her words, as though she wished it were true but knew it was not. Before he could answer, a sharp voice intruded. "Lord Ashford, what an honor to see you among us again." A portly gentleman approached, bowing deeply. Sir Henry Marchmont, one of the local magistrates. With him came his wife, eyes bright with curiosity. Nathaniel returned their greetings courteously, though he noted the way Lady Marchmont's gaze slid at once to Eleanor, narrowing with unmistakable disdain. "Miss Hargrave," the lady said with a smile that did not reach her eyes, "how surprising to see you here." Eleanor curtsied faintly, her face schooled into composure. "Lady Marchmont." The air tightened between them. Nathaniel, who had spent years navigating both battlefield tension and society's subtler duels, recognized the undercurrent at once. There was history here, some stain upon Miss Hargrave's name that the county's gossips had not forgotten. He disliked the coldness in Lady Marchmont's tone. With deliberate courtesy, he offered his arm to Eleanor. "Miss Hargrave," he said, "might I escort you home? These roads are still treacherous from the rain." For a moment she hesitated, caught between refusal and gratitude. Then, with a barely audible breath, she set a hand lightly on his arm. The Marchmont's expressions spoke volumes, but Nathaniel paid them no heed. As they walked together down the lane, he sensed Eleanor's tension like a taut string. "You need not have done that," she murmured at last. "Done what?" "Put yourself between me and their opinion. You will hear more of it if you keep my company." He looked down at her, grey eyes steady. "Miss Hargrave, I have heard cannon fire at dawn, and men scream their last upon fields of mud. Do you think I will tremble at whispers in drawing rooms? Her step faltered, her gaze snapping to his face. For the first time, her composure wavered. Nathaniel slowed, softening his tone. Forgive me, I mean only this. Whatever shadows you live in, I do not fear them. They walked the rest of the way in silence, but when he left her at Mistress Whitcomb's door, Eleanor's eyes lingered on him, troubled, wary, but touched with something else. A spark. Nathaniel felt it too, and as he rode back to Ashford Manor, the first faint stirrings of purpose moved within him, sharper than duty, stronger than the weight of loss. Perhaps he had returned not only to restore his estate, but to bring a woman out of shadows she did not deserve. Chapter 3. Whispers and Secrets. The fortnight passed in a blur of preparations at Ashford Manor. Servants who had grown idle during years of neglect now bustled with renewed purpose, sweeping out dust, polishing chandeliers, trimming hedges gone wild. The village hummed with anticipation of the ball the new lord intended to host, a symbol of his return to society. But while the manor readied itself for music and light, Eleanor Hargrave's world remained cloaked in shadows. She carried out her duties for Mistress Whitcomb with quiet efficiency, yet her thoughts betrayed her. Again and again, her mind returned to the moment in the square, to the weight of Lord Ashford's arm beneath her hand, to the way he had dismissed Lady Marchmont's disdain as though it were nothing. It had been so long since any man had stood on her side, and that frightened her more than the whispers ever had. One morning she walked into the village to fetch medicines for Mistress Whitcomb. As she passed the bakery, two women leaned together at the doorway, speaking low but not so low that Eleanor could not hear. "Did you see Lord Ashford escorting her? Bold, I call it, brazen after all that happened. Oh, but men are easily fooled by a pretty face. They say she ruined her own chances years ago with Sir Edmund Carraway, and not in the proper way. He dropped her quick enough, didn't he?" The words burned, though Eleanor kept her step measured. She had learned long ago never to pause, never to show them their barbs had struck. But inside, her chest ached as if the past had risen like a tide to drown her anew. When she returned to the manor that evening, she found Lord Ashford himself waiting in Mistress Whitcomb's drawing-room. He rose when she entered, and for a moment his gaze caught hers with a warmth that unsettled her composure. "Miss Hargrave," he said, inclining his head, "I hope I do not intrude." "You are most welcome," Mistress Whitcomb assured him, gesturing for Eleanor to pour the tea. As she set the cups on the tray, Nathaniel's voice softened. "I was hoping to ask your assistance, Miss Hargrave. I am restoring the Ashford Library, but the catalogues are in disarray. I recall Mistress Whitcomb telling me you are fond of books." Eleanor stilled. Yes, I read when time permits." "Then might you spare some hours? I should value your eye for order. Besides," he added with the faintest curve of a smile, "it is a task better shared than endured alone." Mistress Whitcomb chuckled, delighted. "Go on, child, a dusty library will do you good, and Lord Ashford will not lack for sensible company." Eleanor hesitated only a heartbeat before nodding. "Very well, my lord, I should be glad to assist." The next afternoon she climbed the grand steps of Ashford Manor. She had not been within such a house in years, and her breath caught at the sight of its vast halls, faded splendor, but splendor nonetheless. The library was a cavernous chamber of carved oak shelves and high windows. Dust motes drifted through the shafts of light, gilding the leather-bound volumes that lined the walls. Nathaniel was already there, sleeves rolled, sorting stacks of neglected books. He looked up with a smile that transformed his often grave features. "Miss Hargrave, you came?" "I gave my word," she said simply, though her pulse quickened. Together they began the work, moving carefully through the shelves, wiping bindings, setting order to chaos. Hours passed in companionable quiet, broken only by the soft thud of books and the scratching of quill on catalogues. Yet conversation slipped in easily, as if the silence itself encouraged trust. "You have read much," Nathaniel observed, glancing at the notes she made. "Your hand is steady, your references precise." "My father was a scholar," Eleanor admitted. "He believed a daughter's mind deserved as much nourishment as a son's." Nathaniel's brows lifted. "A rare belief. He was a rare man." She paused, her voice faltering as memory threatened. Quickly she turned back to her list, and yet it did not save him from ruin. Nathaniel studied her profile, noting the shadows that fell over her expression. He wanted to ask, but some instinct warned him not to press. Instead, he said gently, "Then his daughter honors him still, in every page she tends." Eleanor looked up, startled by the kindness in his tone. Their eyes met, and for an instant the room felt smaller, the air warmer, as though the very walls leaned in to witness the unspoken current between them. She dropped her gaze, her cheeks coloring. "You are generous with your words, my lord." "I am honest with them," he replied. It was dusk when they parted. Eleanor gathered her shawl, preparing to leave, when Nathaniel stepped closer. "Miss Hargrave," he said quietly, "I know the county is not kind to you. I have heard the whispers." Her hand froze on the door handle. Slowly she turned, her face pale but composed. "And do you believe them, my lord?" Nathaniel's grey eyes were steady. "I believe what I see, and what I see is a woman of dignity and strength. The rest, mere noise." For a long moment, Eleanor could not answer. The truth pressed against her lips, the story she had never told, the wound she had kept hidden, but fear held her silent. Instead, she inclined her head. "Then I thank you for your courtesy." She slipped out into the twilight before he could say more. Nathaniel watched her go, a frown creasing his brow. He had not survived years of war without learning to read secrets in men's faces, and Miss Hargrave, for all her composure, carried secrets heavy enough to bow her shoulders. But one thing he knew with certainty: he intended to learn the truth. Not from the gossips, but from her, for something within him whispered that her shadows were not born of guilt, but of wounds unjustly dealt, and he could not help but wonder what light might reveal if she ever let it touch her fully. Chapter 4: A Dangerous Courtship. The ball at Ashford Manor drew nearer, and the county buzzed with anticipation. Invitations, penned in Lord Ashford's firm hand, swept across the countryside like sparks, lighting gossip in every parlour. The return of the Ashfords, the great estate reopening its doors, the chance to glimpse the man who had been a soldier, a recluse, and now a host. But whispers clung to his name not alone. "They say he is often seen with Miss Hargrave." Impossible. Surely not the companion of an old widow. Perhaps she ensnared him. Women of her sort know how to weave their snares. Eleanor heard it all, though never directly. servants' glances, neighbors' murmurs, the tightening lips of matrons at market. Each word stung, though she bore it with silence. Yet what unsettled her most was that Nathaniel did not withdraw. He sought her still. Day after day she found herself at Ashford Manor, helping him restore the library, walking with him through neglected gardens as they discussed the tenants' needs, sitting across from him at Mistress Whitcomb's hearth when he called in the evenings, and always there was that pull between them, subtle at first, then stronger, undeniable, like a current beneath calm waters. One afternoon, as they sorted books in the library, Nathaniel glanced up suddenly. "Miss Hargrave," he said, "have you no wish for a life beyond these walls, beyond whispers and shadows?" Eleanor's hand stilled on a volume of Milton. "A wish is a dangerous thing," she murmured. "Dangerous because it leads to disappointment, and I have had enough of that, my lord." He studied her, his eyes searching. "Then let me ask differently. If there were no obstacles, if reputation, fortune, all the world's chatter meant nothing, what would you wish?" Eleanor looked at him then, truly looked, and the weight of his question pressed against the locked doors of her heart. For a moment she let herself imagine it, a life where she was not whispered about, where she walked freely, laughed openly, belonged wholly. But reality returned like a cold draught. She lowered her gaze. "It is best not to imagine what cannot be." Nathaniel's jaw tightened, his voice quiet but firm. "You speak as though you are condemned, Miss Hargrave, yet I see no crime in you." She closed the book, her fingers trembling slightly. "You see only what I allow you to see." He stepped closer until the faint warmth of his presence reached her. "Then allow me more." Eleanor's breath caught. For an instant she thought he might reach for her hand, might bridge the fragile distance that burned between them. But he stopped himself, and the unspoken words hung in the air like smoke. That evening, when Eleanor returned to Mistress Whitcomb's, a letter awaited her on the hall table. The handwriting froze her blood. "You think the past forgotten? You think a lord's favor will shield you? Remember what you are, Eleanor Hargrave. Shadows cannot live in light. You will be ruined again." Her hands shook as she crushed the paper. She knew that hand, those cruel strokes. Sir Edmund Carroway. Once he had courted her. Once he had whispered vows of devotion, only to discard her publicly when it suited him, leaving forged letters and false rumors in his wake. He had destroyed her name, and she had fled into silence. And now he had returned. 2 nights later, Nathaniel found her in the garden at Whitcomb Manor, her shawl drawn close against the chill. "You have been pale these past days," he said, approaching softly. "What troubles you?" Eleanor forced composure. "Nothing, my lord, only the seasons turn." But he saw through her. "You are not alone in this, Eleanor. Whatever haunts you, let me bear it with you." Her throat tightened at the gentleness in his voice. How could she tell him? How could she drag him into the mire of her disgrace? "You cannot," she whispered. "Cannot?" He took another step, his eyes burning with unspoken resolve. "Or will not let me?" Her breath faltered. "Please, do not ask." He stopped, silence stretching between them. Then slowly he reached for her hand. His touch was warm, steady, anchoring her trembling. "Eleanor," he said, her name low on his lips. I would rather stand with you in shadows than walk alone in light. Her heart broke open at his words. She lifted her gaze, met the fierce tenderness in his eyes, and the world seemed to fall away. They leaned closer, breath mingling, the space between them narrowing until only a whisper remained. And then a sound shattered it, the crunch of footsteps on gravel. Eleanor jerked back, her hand slipping from his. A figure emerged at the gate, tall, broad, a smirk gleaming even in the dim light. Well, well, he drawled, how sweet, the lord and the ruined lady. Eleanor's face drained of color. Nathaniel's jaw hardened, his entire frame shifting with a soldier's readiness. Caraway, he said, his voice like steel. You have no business here. Sir Edmund laughed softly. On the contrary, the lady and I have much unfinished business. Don't we, Eleanor? Eleanor's breath hitched, memories crashing. Betrayal, humiliation, the night her life had shattered. Nathaniel moved closer to her, his presence a shield. Leave, now, or you will find Ashford Steel less forgiving than French cannon. For a moment Caraway's smirk wavered. Then he tipped his hat mockingly and retreated into the night, his footsteps echoing down the lane. Eleanor stood frozen, her heart pounding. Nathaniel turned to her, his hand hovering near her arm but not touching. Tell me, he said softly but firmly, tell me the truth of him. Tears burned in her eyes, but she shook her head. Not tonight, please, not tonight. Nathaniel's expression softened, but his eyes held a vow. Then soon, for I swear, Eleanor, I will not let him drag you back into shadows. That night, as Eleanor lay sleepless in her narrow bed, she knew the time had come. The secrets she had buried for years could no longer remain hidden, for Edmund had returned, and with him the danger of ruin once more. But she also knew this: Nathaniel Ashford was no ordinary man. He was light in a world that had long been dark to her, and though she feared the cost, her heart could not stop reaching for that light. Chapter 5. The Shadows of the Past. The days after Sir Edmund's appearance pressed on Eleanor like a storm cloud. She could not shake the image of him, that smirk, that cruel voice, nor the promise of ruin in his eyes. She tried to avoid Ashford Manor, yet Nathaniel's presence drew her like a flame. At last, unable to bear the weight of silence, she returned to the library, where he worked late among the books and ledgers. He looked up the moment she entered. Relief flickered across his face, though his voice remained steady. Eleanor, her heart trembled at the way he spoke her name, not formally, not distantly, but as though it belonged in his mouth. I came, she said, because I can no longer remain silent. You asked the truth of him. Tonight I will give it. Nathaniel set aside his papers. The lamplight caught the hard planes of his face, the scars at his temple, the grey eyes that saw deeper than most men dared. Then I will listen, he said simply. Eleanor sank into a chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a long moment she could not speak, the memories clawing up like thorns. But then she drew a breath, steadying herself. 3 years ago, she began softly, I believed myself loved. Sir Edmund Caraway courted me. He came to my father's house, spoke with respect, pledged himself with words I was foolish enough to trust. My father, oh, he was so proud, thinking his daughter chosen by a man of wealth and name. Her voice faltered. Nathaniel leaned forward, his gaze steady, urging her on. But Edmund, he had no honor. He sought not marriage, but amusement. When I resisted, When I told him I would not give myself without vows before God, he grew cruel. He forged letters in my hand, vile letters, and let them be found. He spread lies that I had pursued him shamelessly, that I had disgraced myself. Her breath shuddered. In a fortnight my name was ruined. My father's health failed beneath the shame. He died within the year, and I had nothing left but shadows. Mistress Whitcomb took me in when no one else would. That is my truth, my lord. That is the stain society will never let me wash away. Silence fell heavy in the library. Eleanor sat rigid, awaiting disgust, pity, rejection, but Nathaniel rose slowly and crossed to her. He knelt before her chair, taking her trembling hands in his. "Listen to me," he said, his voice low but fierce. "You did not disgrace yourself. He did. Caraway, a coward, a liar. If any man whispers otherwise, it is their shame, not yours." Her eyes blurred with tears. "You cannot know what it is to live beneath such whispers." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Can I not? I have seen men brand me a murderer for what I did in war. They do not care that I carried my brother's body from the field, that I buried boys who were scarcely men. They see only blood and call it sin. I know what it is to live beneath judgment, Eleanor. But I also know this. It does not define you unless you let it." Her breath caught Nathaniel. He cupped her face gently, his calloused thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. "I will not let you hide in shadows any longer." And before fear could stop her, before doubt could rise, Eleanor leaned into him. Their lips met, softly at first, then deeper, as though years of silence broke in one shattering instant. The kiss was not the coy brush of youth, but the desperate, trembling claim of two souls who had suffered and endured and still reached for one another. Eleanor felt her heart open like a locked door, flung wide, Nathaniel's warmth pouring into every corner, long starved of light. When at last they drew apart, her breath came unsteady. This cannot be. Society be damned," Nathaniel said fiercely. "I have lived too long by others' judgments. I will not lose you to theirs." She shook her head, torn between longing and fear. "You do not understand. He will not stop. Edmund will see me ruined again, and you with me if you stand at my side." Nathaniel's eyes hardened, steel beneath fire. "Then let him try. He will find me less forgiving than he remembers." That night, Eleanor returned to her chamber, with lips still tingling from his kiss, heart pounding with equal parts joy and terror. She knew now what her soul had always feared, that she loved him enough that the thought of losing him made her chest ache. But she also knew Edmund. He would not vanish quietly. He had tasted victory once, and men like him could not bear to lose power. The following week, word spread. Ashford Manor's grand ball would not only reopen the estate but mark Lord Ashford's formal re-entry into society. Eleanor felt the weight of it pressing down. If Edmund struck, it would be then, in the blaze of chandeliers, before every watching eye. And yet, when Nathaniel asked her to attend, she found herself unable to refuse. "Come," he said softly, offering his hand. "Let them see you at my side, not in shadows, Eleanor, but in light." Her hand trembled as it touched his. "Then I will come," she whispered, and in her heart fear and hope warred like twin flames, for love had found her. but so had danger. Chapter 6. Betrayal at the ball. Ashford Manor had not seen such splendor in years. Its long-shuttered ballroom blazed with light, thousands of candles mirrored in tall windows and crystal chandeliers. Musicians played lively reels in the gallery, while footmen hurried with trays of champagne. Guests whispered behind fans and raised their brows, all eager to see how Lord Ashford would re-establish his name after years abroad. And at the centre of it all, Eleanor Hargrave descended the staircase at Nathaniel's side. She wore a gown of deep blue satin, modest yet graceful, chosen with Mistress Whitcomb's careful eye. A string of pearls circled her throat, and though her hands trembled, she held her head high. Nathaniel's arm was steady beneath her fingers, a silent promise that she need not fear. The crowd parted as they entered. Conversations faltered. Whispers rose. Is that her, the companion? They say she was ruined once. Lord Ashford brings her openly. Good heavens! Eleanor felt the weight of every gaze like stones pressing upon her shoulders. Yet Nathaniel's presence kept her upright, his calm authority daring anyone to speak too loudly. Breathe, he murmured, leaning close so only she could hear. His hand brushed hers. You are not alone. She glanced up at him, and for a moment the music, the whispers, the glittering eyes, all vanished. There was only his steady grey gaze and the warmth of his presence. The evening unfolded with formalities, polite introductions, restrained smiles, a waltz where Nathaniel led her across the floor with sure strength. Each step felt like defiance, each turn a declaration that she belonged at his side. But as the night wore on, the shadows lengthened. Sir Edmund Carroway arrived late, making his entrance with calculated flair. Dressed in velvet, rings glittering on his fingers, he bowed with exaggerated courtesy to the hostess, then let his eyes sweep the room. When they found Eleanor, a smile curved his lips, a serpent's smile. Eleanor's blood ran cold. Nathaniel's hand tightened protectively at her back. Do not let him see you falter, he said softly. I cannot help it, she whispered. Yes, you can. His eyes held hers. You are stronger than you believe. The night pressed on. The musicians struck up another set. Laughter rose from the jamming tables. The scent of roses mingled with candle wax. Yet beneath it all ran a current of unease. Eleanor felt it, and knew the moment would come. It came at midnight. Sir Edmund stepped into the center of the room, raising a glass of champagne. My lords, ladies, his voice carried commanding attention. May I offer a toast to our gracious host, Lord Ashford, whose courage in war is surpassed only by his generosity this night. Polite applause followed, but Edmund's eyes gleamed as he turned toward Eleanor. And may I also offer a word of caution? He set down his glass with deliberate care. We are gathered in honor of Lord Ashford's return to society. Yet one must ask, what sort of company does he keep? The room hushed. Nathaniel stepped forward, voice iron. Choose your words with care, Carroway. Oh, I shall, Edmund purred, for society has a right to truth, does it not? And truth, alas, is not always so pretty as pearls and satin. From his coat, he drew a packet of papers. He held them aloft for all to see. Here, my friends, lies the proof of a lady's indiscretion. Letters, written in her own hand, offering favors unfit for polite company. Do not take my word alone. Here are her very words. Gasps rippled through the hall, heads craned, eyes fixed upon Eleanor. She went white as snow. Those are forgeries, she whispered hoarsely. They are not mine. Edmund smirked. Ah, but can you prove it? Handwriting is a fickle thing, reputation even more so, once stained, forever marked. He let the papers flutter like poisoned confetti. Tell me, Lord Ashford, is this the woman you would champion? Is this the lady you parade before us, as though she were untainted? The crowd murmured, a tide of judgment rising. Eleanor's breath came sharp, her chest tight. She turned to Nathaniel, shame burning her. I told you, she whispered, he will ruin you. And before he could stop her, she fled, skirts whispering against marble, tears blinding her as she pushed past the startled crowd and out into the cold night. Nathaniel stood frozen for the span of a heartbeat. Then fury surged. He strode forward, voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Enough! All eyes turned to him. His shoulders were squared, his face grim with command. You dare, he said to Edmund, each word like struck steel. You dare bring your lies beneath my roof, to smear a woman whose honor you destroyed once before? Edmund laughed softly. Honor, my dear lord, you know nothing of her. Nathaniel's hand shot out, seizing him by the collar. Gasps echoed. Edmund choked, clawing at his grip. But Nathaniel's voice thundered over the silence. You think me blind? I know what you are. A coward who preys upon innocence, a leech fattened on whispers. You forged those letters once, and you forge them still. But hear me now, before God and every soul present. Eleanor Hargrave is the truest, bravest woman I have ever known. If any among you believe Edmund Carraway's venom, you may leave this house and never return. He released Edmund with a shove that sent him staggering back. The crowd stood stunned, no one daring to move. Nathaniel's chest rose and fell with fury, but beneath it lay something fiercer still, resolve. He turned toward the doors where Eleanor had fled. Excuse me, he said coldly to the room. There is someone far more deserving of my attention than all of you combined. And without another glance, he strode out into the night. Outside, the manor grounds were dark and windswept. Eleanor ran across the lawn toward the moors, her breath ragged, her heart breaking. She thought only of escape, of sparing Nathaniel further ruin. The world would never forgive her past, nor his defense. Better to vanish, to return to shadows where no one could harm him through her. But Nathaniel was not a man to let go so easily. Eleanor, his voice rang across the night, raw with desperation. Do not run from me. She stumbled, tears blinding her, and fell to her knees in the heather. The wind tore at her gown, the stars wheeled above, and still she wept, whispering, Forgive me, I should never have come into your light. And then he was there, falling to his knees beside her, his hands gripping hers with unyielding strength. Chapter 7. Into the light. The night wind howled across the moors, tugging at Eleanor's gown, tossing her dark hair about her tear-streaked face. She knelt in the heather, her heart in tatters, certain that everything she had feared had come true at last. But then Nathaniel was there, breathless from pursuit, his cloak whipping in the storm. He dropped to his knees before her, taking her hands in his own, his eyes burning with a fire that refused to be dimmed. Eleanor, he said hoarsely, look at me. She tried to pull away. No, Nathaniel, you mustn't. I cannot drag you further into my ruin. Let me go back to the shadows where I belong. His grip only tightened. Shadows? Do you not see? You are the only light I have known since I returned from war. Without you, I am nothing but darkness. Her tears fell harder. They will never forgive me. They will never forgive you for standing beside me. Society will tear you apart. Let them try, Nathaniel said fiercely. I have fought worse foes on battlefields drenched in blood. Do you think I will yield now to gossip and lies? Never. She shook her head, voice breaking. You don't understand. But he silenced her with a touch, his calloused hand cupping her cheek, his grey eyes searching hers with a desperate tenderness. I understand this, he whispered. I love you, Eleanor Hargrave. I love your courage, your wit, your quiet strength. I love the woman who endured cruelty, yet still walks with grace. I love the woman who dared to challenge me when no one else would. Do you hear me? I love you, and I will not let you go. Her breath caught, her heart hammering. You love me? With everything in me, he swore. Not to save you, not to shield you, but because you are my heart's own. Without you, Ashford Manor is only stone and ash. With you, it is home. A sob broke from her throat. She tried to look away, but he drew her gaze back, unrelenting. You once told me you lived in shadows, Nathaniel said softly. Then let me bring you into the light. Walk with me, Eleanor, not as a companion, not as a guest, but as my wife. Marry me. For a moment the world stilled. The stars seemed to hold their breath, the wind pausing in its restless song. Eleanor trembled, her heart torn between fear and a longing so deep it nearly undid her. All her life she had hidden, shamed, cast aside. Could she truly step into the light he offered? Could she dare to believe she was worthy of love? She saw the truth in his eyes. He would wait, he would fight, he would never turn away. Slowly, she lifted her hand to his cheek, her thumb brushing the scar at his temple. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Nathaniel, I will marry you. Relief broke across his face, fierce and unguarded. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as though he would never let her go. His mouth found hers, not with hesitation this time, but with a passion that set her soul aflame. The kiss tasted of tears and wind, of despair turned to hope. In his arms, she no longer felt the weight of whispers or the chains of the past. She felt only love, strong, unyielding, eternal. When at last they drew apart, Nathaniel pressed his forehead to hers. Whatever comes, we face it together. No more shadows. No more shadows, she echoed, her voice steady now, her heart full. They rose together, hands clasped, and walked back toward Ashford Manor. Behind them, the moors lay dark and wild, but before them, the windows of the manor glowed with golden light. And for the first time in years, Eleanor did not shrink from it. She stepped into it, hand in hand with the man who had given her back her life. Chapter 8. Ashford Manor Reborn. Spring came early to Ashford that year. The frost melted swiftly, leaving the moors green with new life. The manor, once dark and echoing, seemed to breathe again. Windows were thrown open to let in sunlight. Fresh flowers filled the halls, and the sound of laughter, once a stranger within those walls, now echoed daily. At the heart of it all stood Eleanor, no longer the quiet, unseen companion who crept in shadows. She now walked as Lady Ashford. The title still startled her at times, but each day it grew easier, for Nathaniel never let her forget she was more than worthy of it. Their wedding had been a small private ceremony, no grand ball, no glittering throng of society. Only those few who truly cared for them, Mistress Whitcomb, the loyal steward Harland, and a handful of friends who had stood by Nathaniel through war. It had been enough, more than enough. Now, weeks later, Eleanor stood in the restored garden, sunlight warming her face. She watched Nathaniel oversee the workers repairing the manor's outer walls, sleeves rolled up, hair wind-tossed. Even amid the hammering and bustle, he caught her gaze and smiled, and her heart leapt as it had that first night he kissed her in the library. Mistress Whitcomb joined her at the garden steps, leaning on her cane. "Well, my dear, I must admit I did not think to see this place so full of joy again. Nor you, for that matter." Eleanor smiled softly. "Nor I. For so long I believed happiness was beyond my reach." The old woman's eyes twinkled. "And yet here you are, proof that light has a way of finding us, even when we hide from it." Eleanor touched the pearls at her throat, Nathaniel's wedding gift, though she still kept the modest strand she had worn at that first ball. "Sometimes," she said, her voice quiet but steady, "it is not the light that finds us, but someone who will not stop until he draws us into it." Mistress Whitcomb patted her hand. "A good man, then, and you, child, are a good woman. Do not doubt it again." Later that evening, Nathaniel joined Eleanor on the terrace. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, and the manor's windows glowed with warm light. He slipped an arm about her waist, drawing her close. "Do you hear it?" he murmured. She tilted her head. "Hear what?" "The silence." He smiled faintly. "For weeks, not a whisper of Edmund Carraway. Word is, he left for the continent after the disgrace he suffered. The gossips are busy chasing some new scandal, and Ashford Manor is no longer their stage." Eleanor leaned into him, relief washing over her. "Then it is finished." "It is," Nathaniel said firmly. He kissed her temple. "And even if it were not, I would face it all again, so long as I faced it with you." Her heart swelled with love so deep it nearly brought tears. She turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. "I used to think my life ended when my father died, that I would spend the rest of my days in shadows. But you," her voice wavered, "you gave me back myself, my courage, my heart." Nathaniel brushed a strand of hair from her face, his thumb grazing her cheek. "And you gave me something far greater. I thought myself a man hollowed by war, fit only to endure. But with you, Eleanor, I live, truly live." She kissed him then, slow and tender, the setting sun bathing them in its glow. And as darkness fell, Ashford Manor shone with light, not merely from its windows but from the love that filled it. For Eleanor Hargrave, once lost in shadows, had found her place at last, not as a ghost of scandal, not as a whispered cautionary tale, but as a woman cherished, seen, and adored. And with Nathaniel's hand in hers, she stepped into a future as radiant as the dawn,